what we're trying to do is kind of educate people and ultimately help them make better decisions.
This is The Payoff with me, Sylvia Jeffries. James, welcome to The Payoff podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Sylvia. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I've been watching your social media clips for quite a while now. I'm captivated by your drawings and diagrams and calculations, which once never made sense to me, but now, thanks to you, are much more easy to understand and compute and digest, I think. And I'm sure that's why a lot of people follow you as well.
Yeah.
Congrats on the book. I've been leafing my way through it bit by bit. And I love the advice that your auntie shared with you when you told your family that you were going to write this book. What did she say to you?
She said to me, make sure you tell people that that retirement's boring without any money.
Yeah.
And I think she was referring to her own situation, but I don't know her financial situation. But from the outside looking in, she's had an amazing retirement, and I think it just goes to show that you can have an amazing retirement whether you've got a lot of money, whether you don't. Who knows?
And the hard work in preparing for that starts very early, which a lot of 20-year-olds are probably not really embracing at this point. But that's the point of this podcast, is to open everyone's eyes to how you can start taking some really big steps now to future-proof yourself. Before we get into the book and everything that's in there, all the advice, I'm keen to know what a stress-free retirement might look like for you.
For me, or for
you?
What we see? For me, so that would be not having to worry about money would be the first thing. I really want to be able to spend my time partly between Melbourne and partly between Queensland. Like, we love going up to Queensland on holidays, family holidays.
Where do you go?
So,
Gold Coast?
Gold Coast. Yeah,
I love the Gold Coast.
Like, so many people are like, oh no, not the Gold Coast, but like, it's amazing.
It's the best.
Like the restaurants, the beaches,
wide open beaches, flat running paths, great people, the best people in the world.
So I'd love to be able to split half my time there and half my time in Melbourne in retirement, or maybe at some point earlier than retirement. That's kind of on my bucket list, my wish list.
Yeah.
But then, I'm doing the things, the super, the saving, the investing, so that slowly that, it compounds away. And by the time I'm 60 something, should I be able to do all of that type of stuff?
Well, you have definitely earned a reputation as one of our most followed and well-known financial advisors, finance experts, on the internet, certainly on social media. But finance was kind of an accident for you, wasn't it? How did you get into it?
Yeah, so I'd done a commerce degree at uni, and no one had explained to me after I finished my commerce degree that was so broad that you didn't really actually get a job afterwards. And so it ended up doing some entry-level jobs. That particular job came to an end. And then I just ended up applying for a job in financial advice, an entry-level job in financial advice, and I was just blown away. Absolutely loved it. The advisor that I was working for was a long-term mentor of mine, and still is part of the business today. The stuff that he was doing, and I went into it thinking it was all about the numbers, but I quickly learned it was so much about the relationships. Like, there was so much conversation about what's happening in your life, and what are your kids up to, and what about your grandkids, and what about this thing, and what about that thing, and then, oh, by the way, this, that, or the other with your superannuation or your age pension. And these relationships were so strong. And then the things that we were doing with these clients was just amazing. They'd come in so worried about money. If it was an initial conversation we're having with them, do a few whiteboard diagrams and explain this thing and that thing and the other, and they would leave so much freer of these worries. Oh, this is for me. I absolutely love it. I reckon in another life I would have been a teacher. And it's this kind of crossover between, I've always loved maths, but I've always loved teaching. And doing the two, it's a perfect job for me.
Well, you're sort of doing that online in a way. You're educating a lot of people about some of the things they can do for themselves without necessarily engaging professional advice. How did that all begin? Where did the idea come from to start scribbling out these notes?
So that was that actually stemmed off LinkedIn. So many years ago, I was quite active just posting things on there for something to do. And they sent me an invitation to say, look, we're trialling posting videos native to LinkedIn. Do you want to give it a go? We can see that you're active. I was like, sure, I'll give it a go. I'd never done a video in my life back then. And then the first one was, I had my phone down here, double chin kind of thing going on. But then that went on for a little while. And then a couple of years back, TikTok came about, was all on the scene. I thought, I'll give this a go. And then it was Christmas a couple of years ago that all of a sudden TikTok just blew up for me. I kind of put it down to what I thought it was at the time. It was the 50-something-year-olds having Christmas lunch with their 15-something-year-old kids, and like, what's this TikTok thing about? And so all of these older people joined TikTok, and here's me talking about superannuation and pensions and retirement. And the following kind of just took off, and then Instagram and Facebook, went from there.
And what's been your biggest clip?
It's always about inheritance and tax is always the big one, and that was my Facebook page really took off. It was bumbling along doing nothing, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'm getting all of these notifications of comments on a particular video that I'd posted months earlier. It was just me walking to the gym in like a tracksuit, recording myself talking about the different assets people might inherit and what the implications might be from a tax perspective. I'd posted it months earlier, but then all of a sudden people just started liking it and commenting on it. And then before I knew it, that was at 1 million views. And then my Facebook page just went crazy. So it's these things that you put the least amount of effort into, but it's probably the most natural conversational videos that I do are the ones that actually do the best. But the ones that I think is a really great idea, and I've done all this research and I've mapped out what I'm going to draw in a diagram, sometimes they flop.
Yes, so there's no explaining the algorithm, is there?
There isn't.
So the wealth transfer is something that you touch on in the book, and you touch on online as well, this big shift of wealth that's about to occur. Can you explain what that looks like and how that's going to affect younger generations? Because this is probably why people are so engaged with that particular clip.
Yeah, so we've got this whole generation of people, like the baby boomer type generation, which by and large haven't had any major economic shocks. There's the GFC and these kind of things. But by and large, economies have been good. People have worked. They've bought houses and done other things. And so there's quite this pool of wealth with this kind of older demographic of people that over the next 10, 15 years, naturally, they're going to start to pass away. And barring some other major kind of economic shock between now and then, there's literally trillions of dollars that are going to change hands. Never before have we seen a transfer of wealth this large before. And so we're having conversations with people where this is a reality for them. We might be dealing with mum or dad that maybe they're 80-something years old and they've got their house in the suburbs that they paid next to nothing for, but it's worth millions now, and they might have a bit of retirement savings. And so it's not uncommon for everyday people to be leaving estates $2, $3, $4, $5, $6 million that's then coming down to the next generation. Some of the people that we're actually talking to are acknowledging that this is kind of coming for them potentially. But I actually quite enjoy that. Lots of people trying to have conversations by saying, we want to do things to put us into a really great financial position. And if we get some inheritance, that's just icing on the cake. Or we're having lots and lots of conversations with people, this idea of it leapfrogging a generation, where they're saying, look, if we're comfortable enough, if we've done enough to live the retirement lifestyle that we want to lead, anything extra that we might get from our parents in the form of an inheritance, we'd actually really like to pass that on to our kids and help set them up a little bit earlier in life rather than have them wait until we're gone.
Well, receiving a big fat inheritance sounds like a good thing to me. But you're saying there are some complications to look out for.
There are. So, it's a complication, it starts with the most simple form in that most people have never, had a windfall of a couple $1 million. It's like, well, okay, I've been living my life up until this point. I've had my job, I've paid my mortgage, I've done whatever I've done. But all of a sudden, all of this money lands in my lap. And what am I going to do with it? There's lots and lots of research into the likes of lotto winners, for example. They win all this money, they think they're set for life, they go and buy all of these things, and 5 years later there's nothing left. I can see that happening in this kind of inheritance world, that if people aren't careful with what's going on, they can easily just blow it. So that's the first thing. But then there is a degree of complication with what is it that you're actually inheriting. Is it someone's house? Is it someone's superannuation? Is it their holiday home or investment property? Did they buy Commonwealth Bank or CSL shares moons and moons ago, and it's worth a fortune today? So some of these things that people will inherit, it's nice that you're getting this lump sum of money, but it also comes with a degree of complication that people have to navigate.
Well, what are the tax complications, especially if you look at receiving some of that inheritance before your parents pass away versus after they've passed away?
Yeah, so it depends what you're getting. If it's a family home, someone's home that they've just lived in forever, and that's being received as part of an inheritance, you just get that tax-free. So, I guess anything that you get, you receive it tax-free except for super, and we can come back to that in a minute. But you receive these things tax-free, but then what you subsequently do with it might trigger tax implications for the receiver of these assets. So a family home, for example, that can be sold within 2 years of inheritance and there's no capital gains tax to pay. But if you decide to keep it for longer than 2 years for whatever reason, then you'll start to accrue a capital gain. Things like holiday homes, investment properties, share portfolios and the like, depending on when those assets were purchased, if that asset was purchased before September 1985, and there's not that many of those assets around because it's quite a length of time ago now, you inherit the value of the asset at whatever it was worth when the person died, and capital gains up until then is ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that was purchased post September 1985, which is most things probably these days, you inherit it at the value at whatever they paid for it. So if mum or dad bought an investment property in the suburbs of Sydney 25 years ago for however much they bought it for, and it's worth a fortune now, you inherit that liability, that if ever it gets sold, you're the one that has to pay the tax.
Ah.
Now, to your question is about like if there's gifting happening earlier, well, if mum or dad are selling that asset or giving it on, they're the one that's going to have to pay the tax. So you can't avoid it. It's just a matter of who ends up having to pay it.
Interesting. Okay. And what about superannuation?
Yeah, so super, there's two parts to your superannuation fund. There's what's called a taxable component and a tax-free component. Depending on what's taxable and what's tax-free and who receives the money will then determine whether there's any tax payable. So money that goes to a spouse, someone that you have what's called an interdependent relationship with, or a child under the age of 18, they'll receive that money tax-free, regardless of what components it is. But for anyone else, if it's your adult children, if it's your brother or your sister, or some people it's their parents, they don't have anyone to leave it to, they want to leave it to their own parents. The taxable component of the money that they receive, the receiver may pay up to 17% tax on that. So if you've got a big super balance and a big taxable component, it can mean a big tax bill.
Right. I mean, tax, it's just, it couldn't get more complicated if it tried, could it?
No, exactly.
I know you often speak about anonymous, anecdotes with some of your clients. And a lot of your clients, you say, are earning a really good salary, but still feel really stuck and stretched. How can that be? How does that happen?
It's kind of just life, by and large, people in general spend what they earn. And so if you earn a lower income, you spend a lower income. If you earn a higher income, you spend a higher income. And it comes with a bigger house and more expensive holidays and a nicer car and all of these kind of things. Life can really take hold, school fees and the like. So what we tend to see is there's this kind of overwhelm of information out there, podcasts and Google and AI and all of these kind of things. A lot of where we get to with clients is they're by and large incredibly smart people, but it's almost this overwhelm. Look, I could do this, or I could do that, but I don't know which one I should pick, what's right for me. And all three may be, all good options, but we want to spend a bit of time with them. We're saying, well, what is it that you actually want to do? What's the life that you want to lead? Where are you actually trying to get to? Okay, well then maybe going down path C is the right path for you. A and B might have been okay, but maybe path C is the right one. How
often do you have a client who's just simply not in touch with their financial reality?
It happens from time to time. Fortunately, not as often as you might think.
If they're coming to you, they've probably
done
place.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe a degree of nervousness. People, I won't go and see James or any other financial advisor because they're going to tell me how bad things are. That's not really the case. What we're trying to do is kind of educate people and ultimately help them make better decisions. Sometimes it's just as simple as getting them or us doing it with them, getting them to pull up a calculator that says how long are you going to until you pay off your mortgage. The number of people that have no idea how much longer it's going to take them to pay off their mortgage. They're just chipping away. They might have some money in offset. They're chipping away, making their minimum repayments. But when all of a sudden you turn a calculator around and say, you told me you wanted to retire in 10 years, but it's going to take you 17 years to pay off your mortgage, how are we going to close that gap? And from there you can start to help them make some changes.
If you look back on, maybe, how old are you now? About
41.
41. If you look back on your 20s, do you have like a shoulda, woulda, coulda moment, something you wish you'd taken charge of in your 20s?
There's a couple of things. So one, I wish I didn't spend so much money having a good time in my 20s. I had a great time, travelled and went out a lot. And the wardrobe was overflowing. Like, the jeans and the T-shirts, what I was paying for them now, there is no way I would go and buy them today.
And it's amazing how many versions you can have of the same thing.
I earn a whole lot more today than what I did when I was 20-something years old, but there's no way in the world I would go and buy that same thing. So I blew a whole lot of money on those kind of things. Finances would have been a bit different. The other big thing, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, I bought an apartment off the plan in my probably late 20s, I think it was. I got to a point where I just said to myself, I was earning a certain amount of money, I can't live at home any longer. And I didn't know what I know today. I had this view that rent money was dead money. I'm not going to go and rent somewhere. I'm going to go and buy this apartment. It's going to go up in value. That apartment, probably the best part of 20 years later, certainly 15 years later, is probably worth the same, if not less, than what I bought it for back then. Fortunately, I got out of it, but then you got this opportunity cost that I ended up selling the apartment for less than what I bought it for. But then the house that I subsequently went and bought is probably what I could have bought instead of the apartment in the first place. But then I went and had to pay $300,000 more for the house than the apartment.
What happens with apartments off the plan?
You get, in a lot of places, you just get this oversupply of them. And so, at the time that I bought my one, there were no apartments being built around the area. And I thought, this is going to be great. It's close by the station. It's near the city. It ticks all of these boxes. But in the time between buying it off the plan and it actually being built, there were literally thousands of apartments built within a couple of Ks of where I was. So then you kind of end up in this situation where, why is someone going to buy my apartment when they can just buy the brand new one? I've lived in it for 2 or 3 years. Why they'll just buy the brand new one for pretty much the same price? And then there's just in the block, there's just constantly always one up for sale. If you've got 60 apartments in the building, people's circumstances change. There's always someone going to be wanting to sell it. And so they just never increase in value. Certainly around Melbourne, a lot of them haven't. And that was moved on from it now, but that was one thing that if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have bought that apartment.
Interesting. Property is obviously such a hot topic in this country, and it's like a really emotive topic in this country as well. And I think the lack of access to it at the moment in this housing crisis and the prices being the way they are, so unaffordable for younger generations trying to get in. Where do you stand on property as an asset and how important it is to have one?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the whole retirement planning, if you were to list what's most important through to least important, the way the retirement system works in Australia, number one at the top of that list is owning your own home. And so any seminars that I've done, often I'll talk about it online. There's commentary in the book about it as well, that however you do it and wherever you live and whatever it looks like, you really need to have, at some point in your stepping stones towards retirement, owning your own home. The age pension system works far more in your favour. The healthcare card system works far more in your favour. You're generally far better off owning a home of some variety, an apartment, whatever it might be, and having a whole lot less in retirement savings than the other way around, than having this great big pile of retirement savings and having to rent. And so I'm a big advocate for, at the right time, you need to buy your own home somehow. Yes, it's getting incredibly difficult at the moment, but then you also need to work on paying that off somehow too. And there's no magic answer for that, but it definitely needs to be at the top of the list.
And ideally, when would you have that mortgage paid off? Well, as soon as possible, obviously, but realistically?
As soon as possible, but by the time you retire. Now, for some people that we work with, part of the plans are pulling some money out of their superannuation to pay off their mortgage. And so we do some calculations to say you've got X amount in here. If you take a couple of $100,000 out, yes, you're going to have less in your super. But as a consequence, you'll receive a little bit more age pension or something like that. And then so they end up funding their retirement part with age pension, part their own assets. But that whole age pension thing, the difference between what you can have as a homeowner and what you can have as a non-homeowner is only something like $260,000 difference in the asset limits. I don't know where you're going to buy a house in Australia for $260,000. So house every day of the week, and then you've got what you've got left over.
Okay, so if property, and in particular the home that you live in, is considered, the most important asset for retirement, why do you describe it or classify it as a lifestyle asset?
Because you need to live somewhere. It doesn't. The house that you live in doesn't actually contribute anything towards your retirement from an income perspective. Once you get to retirement, the most important thing for you outside of owning your own home that we were just talking about is then getting access to cash that you can spend. And if you've got all of this money tied up in your own home, it comes with bigger insurance bills and bigger rates and all the rest of it, doesn't actually contribute anything to you. It's something that you have to pay money out ongoing. So it's a bit of a liability in that sense. Whereas we kind of differentiate what you'd call nest egg assets or kind of retirement assets are the things that are actually going to pay you. So your superannuation, your savings, your investment property if you've got it, your shares, whatever that might be. They're the things that you can get your hands on some cash to actually pay for retirement.
Okay. What is your golden rule then for using equity in your home to buy an investment property? Because if we're looking at, generating some passive income for retirement, that's obviously one way that a lot of people lean towards. How can you do that effectively using equity?
Yeah, so look, a lot of people go down that route. One of the worries that we see is too many people too close to retirement with a great big pile of debt. So using the equity in your own home is where you go back to the bank and say, my house is worth this, my loan is this, and the bank will lend you some money secured against your own home. And then you can go and use that to buy assets, whether it's an investment property or shares or something like that. Lots and lots of people in Australia use it to go and buy an investment property. Now, the premise behind that is that you borrow money at a particular rate and then you're hoping to go and buy something that will grow in value over time that ultimately you'll either sell or you'll pay off the debt somehow associated with this thing that you've bought, and then you'll live off the rental or the income that you receive from it. The big drawback with property in that space when it comes to retirement is typically the income that you earn, the rent that you receive is pretty low relative to the value of the property, and then it comes with a whole host of expenses associated with holding that property. So it can be a great strategy for the right person at the right age to help them kind of accelerate the building of their assets, but for the wrong person at the wrong time, it can also blow up retirement plans.
It's an extra burden.
Yeah.
So if you were perhaps weighing up using equity to fund an investment property versus shares, what would you be mindful of? What would you be looking out for?
So in both spaces, you need to be really conscious of your timeframes around when do I need to be able to access the money that's stored in this asset, and then in which way, shape, or form am I going to be able to pay off this debt? The advantage that shares has in that equation is that you can sell small parts of your shares off if you need to either turn it into cash and spend or help pay off the loan, versus the property. You either own the whole thing or you don't, and so there's no in between. The advantage that property has when you compare investing in property versus investing in shares is that banks are more willing to lend you more money to go and buy property than they are for shares. And so when you plug those numbers into a calculator, the property tends to win in that regard. But you need to be really, really careful that you've borrowed this great big pile of money, and that debt needs to go by the time you retire. Otherwise, you've got next to no hope.
So you need the time.
You need the
chip
time
away at it
Yep.
to make it work. So the book is called Retire Life Ready. What have you found around what the average age of retirement is these days in Australia?
Yeah, so we tend to see lots of people aspiring to a retirement at some point between 60 and 65. Some people maybe look at their financial position and say, I maybe need to go a little bit longer, 67 to get the age pension. But in doing some research for the book, I kind of uncovered that there's a lot of people, far more people actually end up retiring earlier than what they anticipated. And so if you're mid-50s or something, you're thinking, okay, I've probably got 10 years ahead of me or something like that. Lots of people end up retiring earlier, and more often than not, these people that are retiring earlier than they anticipated, it's forced upon them in some way, shape, or form.
A redundancy or lost job or
redundancy, lost
sickness.
job, but the big one's health, and it's not necessarily your own health. It might be someone that's important in your life. So maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a child.
You're providing care.
And so all of a sudden you're like, well, I can't go to work because I need to take this person backwards and forwards to doctor's appointments or whatever's going on. And then that kind of disrupts the plans. And then you're kind of in this world of, well, we've got what we've got. How do we make best use of what we've got?
You weren't prepared for an extra 10 years of retirement.
Rather than, the extra 10 years that we're hoping to work.
So you must get asked almost every day, what do I need to retire comfortably? How much money do I need for a comfortable retirement?
Yeah.
How do you answer that question?
So you want to start by understanding what does comfortable mean to you. So comfortable to you and comfortable to me may mean very different things. And that then transpires to very different spending amounts. There's different groups that publish reports on how much people and what the average person spends. You can look those up, but what I always encourage people to look at is what is their definition of comfortable, and they'll give you, spending this much, travelling this often, and so forth. When I raise some of these reports with people, they often get shocked and say, well, my definition of comfortable is travelling overseas every year for the first 10 or 15 years. And maybe some of these reports have a different definition of travel, for example. So that then means a different number. So that's kind of the starting point, is what do you actually want? And there's some exercises in the book to help people work through what are they actually spending and what might retirement cost them. And then from there you can then start to look at, well, okay, what's the level of assets that I need? I have this rule of thumb that I tend to default to if you can at all possibly, and look, to be honest, not a lot of people get there, but a target to try and aspire to is having 20 times what you want to spend in retirement savings. So not the value of your home, we were talking about before, but your superannuation, your investment property, your shares, whatever it is that you're doing, try and build that to 20 times what you're hoping to spend in retirement.
So I was thinking about that because, looking at your findings around a lot of people retiring, and it's forced upon them in the mid-50s, and a lot of us are living into our mid-90s. These days there's 40 years of no income to cover. So is timesing it by 20 quite conservative?
So timesing it by 20 will then get you to a point where if you're investing that money reasonably well, 7-8%, a pretty typical kind of standard balanced super fund type return, you're earning enough money to compensate you for what you're spending. So you're spending part of the capital, but you're earning more than what you're actually spending, and so that money maintains itself forever. It's not as simple as we're going to spend this money down every year for 20 years and then we'll have nothing. If you can get to that 20 times number, and provided you're actually investing appropriately for the long term, you should never run out of money. The likelihood of you running out is very, 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 very low. And as you pointed out, lots of people will be living 30 plus years in retirement. And as time goes on, we all end up living longer. So it's another half of your life again for most people in retirement without a wage coming in. It's a big gap to fill.
So we have to work harder at all this stuff now, so much harder. I know you talk in the book a lot about good debt and bad debt.
Yeah.
And usually high on the list of bad debt is a car, right? A lot of people get themselves into a lot of debt buying a vehicle that's probably more fancy than is required. So what is your rule of thumb when it comes to purchasing a vehicle?
Yeah, so you want to try and keep the toys, as you might call them, the cars, the caravans, the boats, these kind of things. A rough rule of thumb that I picked up from someone many years ago was to try and keep the value of those assets to less than half of what your after-tax income is. So if you're earning $100,000 a year and your after-tax income's $70,000 or whatever it is, that'd be spend $35,000 on these things total. And that's often far lower than what most people are doing. But that then means that you're not spending a whole lot of money on these toys, and allows you to pay off your debt and do the investing and so forth. Now, in time, you can spend more money on those types of things if they bring you some degree of satisfaction, but doing that too early on in life, probably not a great idea.
Have you ever blown your budget on a car?
Yeah, well, when I look at that myself, I wasn't complying with my own rule for a while, but we actually made some shuffling around of things.
Yeah.
We don't own a lot of stuff. Like I actually walk around my house and there's some paintings on the wall that'd be nice, or a different couch here or a different couch there. But then my wife and I are like, no, we'd actually rather go on another holiday. Who cares about the painting on the wall? We'd rather go on another holiday. So we're kind of prioritising where we're spending our money on those kind of things and less on others.
What do you find with your clients? And I think this is interesting for some of our younger listeners who are probably not considering their retirement all that often at the moment. But when you've got people at that stage in their life coming to you, what do you find are their priorities? What are they wanting to spend money on?
So people want to spend money on having a good time, and so we're big advocates for that. You need to. It's all well and good to be talking about retirement and when you're 60 years old and so forth. And as we're just saying, you might not actually make it, and so you need to get that balance right between having a good time now, but also having some consideration of tomorrow. What might tomorrow bring, and appreciating that you're not going to work forever. You will get older, and whatever it is that you do, you're not going to be able to continue doing that forever. But you need to get that balance right. so, we spend a bit of time with people saying, well, if you're doing this thing and you're doing that thing and you're doing the other, we plug that into a bit of a calculator, that says you're probably going to be perfectly fine. So that then gives them a bit of space to say, well, great, if we're doing these things and that's all automated and that's taken care of, anything else that we've got, we can spend on having a good time now. Buy a nicer car, go on another holiday, whatever it is. And that's a bit of a freeing exercise for people to go through, rather than thinking that they have to have this budget and they have to track every single cent and they can't possibly spend something on something nice that they want to do. If we give them a bit of scope to say, you're doing all of these things, now go and have a good time, that's a great life for them.
So if you'd said any of this to me when I was in my 20s and living in Bondi and spending every cent of my salary and, living month to month, week to week, I would have said, go away with your sacrifices. That sounds boring. I'm going out again tonight. So how can you reframe these moves, these decisions, these choices that we make as something that can empower them or something that can excite them for the future?
Yeah, I think it's just understanding, looking at, as boring as it might sound, but looking at some of these simple compound growth calculators. Like, it's really boring, I know, and the 20-year-old that's running around Bondi is probably not going to look at a compound growth calculator. But just understanding that $20 a week or $20 a month or $50 a week or $50 a month, just a little bit now. Before you know it, you're going to wake up and you're 40-something years old and you're like, where the hell did the last 15 years just go? And then you start to look back and you're like, oh, well, I wish if only I had have done this thing. I was talking about before some of my own, regrets and so forth. It's amazing how quickly time goes. And if you're setting up something that's just small and it happens automatically, you kind of forget about it. And then all of a sudden you wake up 15 years later, you're like, oh, wow, look at this pot of money that I've managed to build.
It's magic, really, isn't it?
It is.
It is one of the wonders of the world. If you could give every listener today one piece of advice to go out and do today or this week to take charge of their future, what would it be?
I'd have them start by understanding what is it that they're actually wanting to do. So many people just go through life saying that I'm going to retire at some point around age 60, but actually stop and think about what is it that you really want to do, at what time frame, and what are the things that you want to be surrounding yourself with and occupying your time with. What does that look like? What is that going to cost? And I think just that exercise alone will wake a few people up to, actually, I think I need to start to get serious about some of this.
Have you set an age, a desired age for retirement?
Yeah. So I've set myself a couple of targets. I want to have my mortgage paid off by the time I'm 50.
Mm-hmm.
That'll coincide with around the time that my youngest is also finishing high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll have a 10-year window ahead of me that I plan on working for, where the mortgage is done, schooling for kids is done, and then I can get really cracking on doing the investing and buying the holiday home in the Gold Coast and all of that, having a bit more fun time and have that other end.
Nice. Well, the other thing that people can do is go out and buy your book. There's lots of worksheets in there. They're really useful. I'm going to scribble away on them on the weekend, James. Congratulations on the book. And thanks so much for joining. I'll see you on the Gold Coast sometime.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.